Now, with President Muhammadu Buhari stepping down after serving 2 terms, many Nigerians hoped a clean vote would open the way to a leader able to tackle insecurity, ease economic malaise, and manage poverty in Africa's most populous country. The Election Commission, that's INEC, has said the vote was free and fair, but the main opposition parties, the PDP and Labour, have called for the results to be scrapped, alleging massive manipulation of tallies. And the Labour Party has announced that it will mount a legal challenge against Tinubu's victory. Many voters are furious that delays and alleged vote rigging have once again marred an election in Nigeria.
The INEC promised us we would have an election that would be electronically transmitted. What would it cost the INEC to ensure that as we were voting at each polling unit, as they were recording the results were being sent, even if it had to be sent to 37 screens, for people to be watching it live on TV, 1 per state? What would it cost them to give us transparency? We did not get a free and fair election February 25th.
Yes. Go around the 36 states and FCT. There's no way anybody is celebrating.
Why?
Even the APC that claim they've won, they're not even celebrating. Look at their faces. Go around. They know they did not win. The contract is simple. INEC promised Nigerians that the beavers was going to work. They switched it off when they saw that Peter Obi was leading.
Elder statesman Tanko Yakasai is asking the president-elect Bola Tinubu to run an all-inclusive government by giving all parts of the country a sense of belonging. Yakasai also called for the reintroduction of the strategy of the National Development Plan, which he said is universally accepted as a panacea for nation building. Addressing a press conference Wednesday in Abuja, the 98-year-old Kano-born politician also urged the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, and others who contested the election to embrace the outcome and congratulate the winner. He said the election had shown that democracy is evolving and consolidating in Nigeria, and urged the president-elect to reintroduce the strategy of the National Development Plan.
Democracy is a business of competition. If you kill competition in a democracy, you kill democracy. So let everybody come with his own program. If the electorate voted for him, let him put his program into action. And where he concluded his own part, let the man that is coming after him build from where the previous man stopped. And this is how you develop a country. As in every election, there has to be a winner and a loser. Last but not the least, my call is to the winner, actually you, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I am sending my congratulations to you for this well-deserved victory, and I urge you to run an all-inclusive government that will give every Nigerian from all parts of the country a sense of belonging.
Well, it's been a very long and busy day for the president-elect, Bola Tinubu. Now, to help us understand the first 24 hours of the man who, if everything goes well for him, will lead Nigeria for the next 4 years, is Arise analyst Constance Ikokwu. Good to see you, Constance, and thanks for your time. Finally, we have a president-elect, and perhaps, well, the conversations are enormous. But let's start first by talking about the very first speech he gave, talking about the acceptance speech just before he got the certificate of return. What can you glean from that speech from Nigeria's president-elect?
So he actually, when he was when the results came through, the final results came through, first of all, gave a brief speech, and then, of course, during the certificate of return handover to him, he gave another speech, a more extensive speech. And the first thing is that the tone of that speech was conciliatory. It was very balanced. I think that the speechwriter did a great job, actually. And I think it's because of the mood of the nation. It's been a keenly contested election. And it wasn't a landslide for the APC. I mean, they didn't trash the other two opponents. It was quite close. You know, I mean, he won with 36% of the votes in a country as big as Nigeria. The closest rival, I think, was 29%. And then the Labour Party contender was 25%. So in that kind of circumstance, you have to sit down and think, with all that's gone on in the last few days, where people were very frustrated and angry about the entire process, it made sense not to come in front of everyone and be overjoyed. It was better to sort of take a different approach, and that's what he did. The delivery was not spectacular. We weren't expecting a spectacular delivery, but the content was really good. So I would like to sort of dissect his speech.
No, go ahead.
So from the first time when he made the brief, he said he asked his contestants to team up with him to go on this journey. And then he said, it's the only nation we have. We must build together, work together to put the broken pieces together, to put the broken pieces together. I think that was important, broken pieces. So that's recognizing that something is broken in the country. Whether it was broken before the elections or during the electoral process, you do see that something needs to be done. So it's good that he said that. And then he went on to ask that we work for unity, happiness, and harmony. You see, we always hear the word unity in Nigeria. A lot of politicians bandied that word, but I don't know if they actually mean what they say, because they say it, and then the actions, a lot of times, doesn't match the word. The second thing is that when you say unity, unity can only be based on fairness and justice. When you do not follow the rules, or when it seems things are not done properly, and you turn around to ask for unity, that's a big ask. So I think Nigerians will be watching to see how he's able to rally the country together. It will be a tough job for him in this atmosphere. Of course, you don't see a lot of people protesting in the streets. Everywhere is tranquil, but you can feel almost the sadness across the country, except, in the Southwest. Earlier today, I had calls from Nigerians in the diaspora. People were like, somebody died. We're literally mourning. Is this what we get after all the expectations? So the president-elect has a lot of work to do. So we'll go on. He said his mandate represents our collective democratic aspiration. I don't know about that. There is a lot of disappointment during this process. So I don't know if that represents everyone's aspiration. He mentioned young people severally, which was a smart move. Because in this election, young people spoke loud and clear. We have woken up. We want to be part of this process. So it was smart of him to say something, several times he said, young people shall one day be leaders. The question is, when is that one day going to come? When is one day? He's already 70. I guess that young people will hope that that day is soonest and not later. And then he said, I may be president, but I need you more. Nigeria needs you more. That is very correct. Yeah. Yes, the president has, exclusive powers, wide-ranging powers in Nigeria. But the president cannot do it alone. You need the country to believe in you. You need legitimacy. If you do not have legitimacy as a president, you will be struggling throughout. So that's a good point.
Before you get to the other point, now
Yes.
talking about legitimacy, which is very important, yeah, and also the courting of the youth of the country. It reminds us of President Electoral then, who admitted election flaws that brought him into office. Now, would that have also been too quick of a statement to come from the president-elect on the day?
No, I don't understand.
No. You know, when President Electoral came in, then the late president, he accepted that he was elected in an election fraught with irregularities. And some, going by what we have seen in Nigeria at the moment, would it have been okay for the president-elect Bola Tinubu to say, well, I've been elected, but there are some buts and ifs surrounding this process?
Well, when you look at the way the APC members have carried on, a lot of them, from what they have said so far, do not actually believe that the process was fraudulent. We were here when other parties held press conferences and asked the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, to postpone the elections or to cancel the elections. And he went on with the collation, obviously because he believes that he was doing a good job and the process was to some extent free and fair. So I do not think that the president-elect would have gone down that road, you know, to accept that the election that brought him into power was faulty. Again, INEC chairman had said to the people, to other parties, if you have problems, do go to the election petition tribunal. I think that is what Bola Tinubu would have in mind. If you have any problems with what has transpired in the last few days, go to the election petition tribunal and we will meet in court.
Okay, let's go to other parts of the speech then, if you don't mind.
He talked about prosperity. He said, let us create,
that
prosperity.
must excite Nigerians.
Excite, well, we need prosperity. The work that needs to be done, although to bring that to fruition is a lot. I mean, we have trillions of debt right now. I think over 70% of our budget is spent on debt service. So the president-elect has his work cut out for him. And we wish him good luck. He talked about brotherhood. Brotherhood, that's a really strong word. Sort of trying to open up the space and say, we are all one. Let's come together. Let's build this nation together, whatever has happened. And he talked about establishing peace. Peace is crucial, as we know. We have been facing challenges security-wise, whether it's terrorism, whether it's aggression from banditry, and all sorts. Non-state actors that, you know, have sort of been running amok in some parts of the country. So again, it's going to be a tough one for him to manage the security of the country. And he said, my heart, my door is open. You know, when I was listening to that, I sort of remembered when President Buhari was being sworn in. He had said, I'm for everyone or no one, something in those lines.
Yes, you're right.
So this is the opposite. The president-elect Bola Tinubu is saying, my heart, my door is open. So it's sort of spreading his arms wide to say, I will take a different approach, give me a chance, and...
More like saying, I'm going to be a listening president.
Yes, I think that's what he's saying. But, you know, this is talk. We will then see if this happens. I think that's much of the speech. But people want to know, really, what is going to happen when he is sworn in. The Labour Party has gone to court, so we do not know how, you know, what will happen in the following months. But it was a speech that had good content, and, you know, he did well.
You know, a pass mark there from Constance Ikokwu to President-elect. But again, one other point we must also raise here. The first time he spoke, you know, offhand, without any prepared script. That was when the news got to him. his first acceptance speech was without a script. And the second time, getting the certificate was with a prepared speech. And some other analysts have said, looking at Bola Tinubu in the early hours of today and pretty much later at about 4 in the evening when he picked the certificate of return, it doesn't look like a man, some have said in social media, was a little bit unstable. You could see a man who was actually spot on, and he had some bit of humor. You saw the part when he spoke about the wife, saying that, look, she's not coming back to the Senate, she's going to be a housewife, and somehow he threw a jibe, taking off from President Buhari's talk of the other room.
Yes, yes.
That was a fine one for the president. But in all of that, let's talk more about what he said about education, because in the early hours he spoke about education, and where he said there will be no more strikes, and he also said, well, the university autonomy will be a thing that he will birth.
You see, education in Nigeria needs an overhaul. We have serious problems in that sector, not only at tertiary level, but at primary level as well. Limited funding or lack of it, you know, is a major issue. So whoever, you know, becomes the president or the president-elect has a lot of work to do in that area. There has to be more innovative ways to manage education in this country. Most of the federal universities are funded by government. Today, much of the government budget goes into other areas. The money allocated to education is not even enough. And the discussion we need to have, honestly, is, can government continue to fund tertiary institutions 100%? Are there other ways to do it, really? So he needs to have a team to get cracking before the swearing in. And any president that is serious about moving Nigeria forward, these things can be done. They can. It just needs willpower, focus, and honesty, really. Are you ready to work and solve the problems, or do you just want to be president for the sake of being president? You know, so apart from that, I want to tie it into something else, another broader discussion that I think we should be having in this country, falling back on the electoral process. Are elections the solution to our problems in this country? I mean, just the exercise of every 4 years, you have elections that sometimes seems like they're meaningless. At the end of the 4 years, it doesn't look like much has happened. Politicians go on again on the drive of, you know, campaigns. We have another elections, and people fight one another and then wait for the next 4 years. What do we achieve every cycle? Are there other ways that we can run this country? Or if we decide that we want to continue with electoral exercises, how do we make sure that they satisfy the yearnings and the expectations of people? Look at what happened. The lessons that we need to learn from these elections. There is no one that should go to the poll and stay there the whole day till the next morning just to vote. You're right. We can do better than that. So people that had to sleep at polling stations, you could see the eagerness to vote, but it was like painful. Why should it be so? It should never happen again in this country. So this is a lesson we need to do better, improvements that we need to make. Technology. Yeah. What is so difficult about technology? You go to Lagos, you have young kids, Gen Z, or even older than Gen Z, in the private sector that do fantastic stuff with technology. So the culture in the private sector and the public sector is so wide. Can we begin to borrow some of those culture in the private sector to help? Election, I think some young guys can run this technology of INEC very easily and deliver with no big problems. You understand what I'm saying? So I think this is a major lesson we should learn. What should we be doing to improve the electoral process from that angle? And then I think this election is also showing that people have the power. And when the people wake up, you cannot stop them.
And I think perhaps, I hope you don't lose your train of thoughts, perhaps that explains why the president spoke addressing the youth, especially by also talking to the women groups, saying, look, I see a day whereby standing here will be a very young Nigerian as your president, and also a day whereby a woman may emerge as a leader of the country. So in all of this, how do we place this? Is it the awareness or some form of pushback against what has not been given to the people over the years in terms of the good of democracy?
Yeah, so awareness is one of it, which could be tied into voter education. I think a lot of people still do not deeply understand how this so-called election affects their lives. There is a lot of ignorance in the country. So when did we start this so-called, the latest democracy in 1999? In most rural areas, yes, they have an idea, but we need to penetrate and get people to become really, really engaged. It has already started, and he acknowledged that by mentioning the youth. Look at the results, the numbers. He got just over 8 million votes. The PDP, over 6 million votes. And the Labour Party, the underdog, that many people did not give a chance, did not see them coming. They had over 6 million votes. You cannot play with that. And most of it is also young people. They're like, we are here to stay. So when the president-elect says, one day, you shall be standing here like me, I think that the youth will be saying, I hope that day is coming soon. So let's see what kind of cabinet he puts together. And let's see what kind of government he runs. So that would indicate whether he means what he says or whether he was just reading a speech.
Speaking of cabinet now, quickly, being a politician that is a veteran politician and someone who's been a two-time governor of Lagos State, what do you think of his cabinet? Do you see him as on day of swearing in, electing some or appointing some people that will run the cabinet with him from the word go? Because we've had a bad history with the last administration.
Yes, good question, because yes, like you said, the last administration waited 6 months before the president had a team in place. I don't think that will happen in this administration. This man has been governor for 8 years in Lagos. And from what we saw, to some measure, Lagos was transformed. And he did it by appointing capable people. I think he's the kind of person that sees talent and draws in the talent. So we're hoping that he has the say. I mean, he's the president, but I don't know, the team, he has a vice president that is equally very strong. I hope that they have a say and they're able to bring on board.
I'd like to come back. Sorry to cut you there, Constance. Right. I'd like to come back so that we can talk more about the vice president elect, because we haven't actually said anything about him, so that some people can get a sense of who the man is. Kashim Shettima, you're watching the special coverage of our election here in Nigeria. Plenty more to come, including reactions from major opposition parties. Stay with us. The People's Democratic Party in Lagos State has rejected Saturday's election results announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission, calling for cancellation in areas where irregularities were reported. While speaking at the party's state secretariat on Tuesday, the chapter's chairman, Philip Olabode Ivoji, called on INEC chairman Mahmoud Yakubu to immediately stop the collation of results from Lagos until a fresh election is conducted. Ivoji alleged that members of the All Progressives Congress in Lagos conspired with some INEC representatives to manipulate results from various units. He listed some polling units in Surulere, Ikorodu, Etiosa, Koshofe, Agege, Ikeja, Oshodi, Isolo, and Ekpe, among others, as local government areas where there were manipulations and violence perpetrated by those he alleged to be APC thugs.
The Lagos State chapter of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, wish to inform Nigerians and the international community that the Saturday presidential and National Assembly elections in the state were fraught with lots of irregularities. We have it on good authority that the All Progressive Congress, APC, in the state colluded with some independent National Electoral Commission, INEC officials, to manipulate the result of the polls.
Well, still in the studio to help us assess how the opposition and civil society organizations have reacted to the announcement of Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's president-elect is our Rise News analyst Constance Ikokwu. And Chima Christian now joins us, who is a public affairs analyst. Let's continue with you, Constance, quickly here. We're talking about the vice president-elect, Kashim Shettima. Speak to us about this banker turned politician who's a two-time governor of Borno State, and also the last time we saw he was at the Senate 2019 as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Well, Kashim Shettima is an interesting personality. He cuts a more stern figure compared to Ahmed Bola Tinubu. Most times he looks
more stern,
as in severe. Severe.
Yes.
You know, don't you see him?
let me break it down. Serious.
Yes.
Serious looking.
Exactly. You know, very serious. You know, during the campaigns, when people look at his face, they're like, "Why is he angry or what is going on?" But he does have a sense of humor. Remember during the campaigns when he was in Lagos for an event, he wore a suit and wore sneakers.
Oh, that was the NBA event.
Yes. He wore sneakers and people were making fun of him. He became a meme on social media. And the next time he had the opportunity to talk, he made fun of himself. You know, he didn't take it so seriously, you know, and that passed. But he also throws some jabs, saying, for instance, the vice president, Yemi Oshibanjo, good men should be selling popcorns in the streets or something.
And ice cream.
On the ice cream, something in those lines, yes. So, but he is an astute politician. And he became governor when Jonathan was president. And it was a very difficult time, challenging, because it was around the Chibok girls getting missing or being kidnapped. Very terrible. Boko Haram, at the height of the Boko Haram problem. And he managed the state, he held on, and he was a people's man. His people knew him very well. He was able to sort of carry them along and hold down the state for 8 years before he left and became a senator. And during the campaigns, you know, there were some issues about whether he was Fulani or Kanuri, and he was saying that being Kanuri will work against him. I guess it hasn't so far. So the team, both of them, he did also mention that he will be in charge of security if this ticket wins. And it made some people a little bit jittery, because it was sort of, the president is the commander-in-chief and should be in charge of security. So why should Kashim Shettima be speaking about security? And then he played into the conspiracy theory that, you know, Bola Ahmed Tinubu is, you know, has health challenges, and maybe that's why we would see a more active, agile, forceful Kashim Shettima. This is yet to be seen. You know, if they make it to the swearing in and they start their government, we'll see how that plays out. But, you know, he's a much younger person than the president-elect. And my sense is that he will be very active. He will probably be given a big role as vice president. In the past, we have seen instances where the vice president literally has nothing to do. He's running around like a houseboy. The difference was during President Obasanjo's tenure, the vice president was powerful, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. He was in charge of the economic team. He did well. He managed a lot of the privatization programs and so many other things. And he also helped the president then to put together a fantastic economic management team, and they did what they did during that tenure. And then moved over to Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who was sick. He ruled for a very short time and left. His vice president wasn't very active. It didn't seem that he was given much to do. And then, President Muhammadu Buhari came into power. The first 4 years, the vice president, it looked like he had confidence in Yemi Osinbajo. But after a while, it looked like we didn't hear anything from Yemi Osinbajo anymore. From his office, some responsibilities were taken from him, and he sort of retreated and disappeared. So there is a lot of power that comes from the president. So the work of the vice president will be determined by that kind of president. I think that with Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you might see a ticket where they sort of work half and half balanced and try to manage the difficult situation that we have now in the country.
And do you think it should be a constitutional issue, looking at the powers that should also go specifically looking at it constitutionally? Because now you just took us back down memory lane. Some would say perhaps it was as a result of the power play between former President Obasanjo and Atiku Abubakar that informed why pretty much later we saw presidents who tried as much as possible to perhaps whittle down the powers or the job description of the vice president till this moment.
Perhaps it is.
Because it looks as if Atiku was the most powerful vice president since 1999.
To date, yes, he was. Perhaps it's a constitutional matter to look at, but we have to give it to former President Olusegun Obasanjo. He has his failings. And so everybody has their major failings. But when you come to his tenure, he really gave Alhaji Atiku Abubakar the leeway to operate. He really saw him as his team until they fell out because of the ambition of Atiku Abubakar. Of course, as if you can remember, Atiku Abubakar wanted to run against Obasanjo in the second term, so he wanted to get out of the ticket and run against his boss. President Obasanjo was dismayed. And being a soldier that he used to be, I don't think he ever forgave him. So he sort of begged him that they came back and ran on the same ticket for the second term and won. It was never the same again, because I think he felt that it was a betrayal of trust. I mean, there might be other reasons that Atiku Abubakar decided to make that move. However, that move didn't go down well at all.
Now, quickly here before we go on the break, one other sore point here has to do with working together as a team. I'm happy you said Obasanjo took Atiku Abubakar as a team member in his first, term in office. But the bickerings of presidents and their vice, are things that have not worked well on the continent. We saw that in Kenya between former President Uhuru Kenyatta and now President William Ruto. And what kind of synergy are you expecting from a Bola Tinubu presidency and the vice president elect?
So you never fully know, right? You might make some conjectures based on the person's character and what they have done in the past. But with more power comes other sort of behaviors, And in Nigeria, the president, has immense powers. And then if you become a vice president, you sort of run in a nation where the president is like God. And if the president is weak, the vice president could become powerful. But then again, it goes to having a thought seriously about who you pick as the vice president, as your team member, as your running mate, because that will determine a lot. You need someone to hold the fort, you know, while you're not around, or even, you know, do some other work when you're, you know, doing some, you know, when you are facing, you need someone to help you. It's not something that you can do alone. Of course, you also have the cabinet, the ministers, and the other people that form, whether they have the kitchen cabinet and the outside cabinet, but you need someone that have good that you have good synergies with, that you can function properly with.
All right, okay, Constance, we'll come back. You've been watching our special coverage of the presidential and National Assembly elections here on Arise News. It's time for a moment. When we come back, we'll bring you more. Stay with us. As you heard earlier, the Labour Party says it will challenge Bola Tinubu's victory in court. The party's Delta State governorship candidate Ken Pella has also been condemning Saturday's elections in the state. He also accused INEC of disenfranchising the people as they failed to upload the results to the server. He says the exact motive was applied to the Senate and House of Representatives vote.
Places that used to return 100,000 return 3,000, 4,000, 10,000. The beavers walked to that extent. However, because the INEC chose, not because technology failed, not because there was no network, not because of any other reason, they chose to do what they wanted to do, giving room for results to be manipulated.
It happened in Okwani local government, it happened in Ndokwa West local government, it happened in Ndokwa East, it even happened in Anyocha North. Places where either there was outright refusal to transmit the results, and the results were falsified before they were being brought to the collation center, or several other irregularities. In different local governments, the form of irregularity is different. But in these local governments I've called, the results were apparently manipulated and results.
We found out that the results are different. A lot of the results are different from what people collated, other agents have from their polling units. So I don't know where they manipulated these results from. Are they not trying to change the will of the people? Are they not going to choose who is going to represent us, or the people are supposed to choose the people that are going to represent them?
All right, news analyst Dr. Constance Ikokwu is still with me here, and we coasting to bring this to a close here. Quickly here, let's talk more about the powers or otherwise of the vice president. That's a good office that we must have a firm understanding of.
Yes, so let's finish on that. I have here with me section 153(1) of the 1999 Constitution. Gives the VP the job of the chair of the National Economic Council, the membership of which includes the 36 governors, CBN governor, and finance minister, amongst others. It's a council with enormous powers and responsibilities. So that explains why Alhaji Atiku Abubakar was able to do what he did, but the president also allowed him. I mean,
now, speaking of which, Economic Council, we didn't see much of that in this outgoing administration with President Buhari and the vice president. We didn't see much of activities, so to speak. Perhaps, who knows, Kashim Shettima, a former banker and an economist, perhaps should be able to help in that regard. Now let's talk more about the complaints. They are so loud from oppositions as well as civil society groups. Make for us a sense of how these will pan out in the days to come.
So, you know, someone called me from the East this morning and told me that, you know what she's happy about? People were expecting that the next day the whole Eastern region would be on fire. And it wasn't really that case. A lot of people stayed home, or those who had things to do went about their own businesses, even when soldiers were deployed this morning. More soldiers were deployed this morning to checkmate any protest, you know, but that didn't happen. So, but there is...
Let me put some clarification. We're already Thursday morning, so I guess you were talking about Wednesday morning.
No, I'm talking about this morning.
No,
I'm confused.
It does happen once you're live in the studio, and you've been talking from day one into the next day. So we're early hours of Thursday morning, March 2.
Oh my goodness, it's past my bedtime. So
absolutely.
Okay, yes. So
it's okay.
We're talking about Wednesday. So the thing is, so I think people are beginning to be wiser. No one wants to die for politicians anymore. Look, these young people are like, we're going to take a different strategy. You send your children to go and die because, your children are living abroad in good schools, have access to good health care. This has to stop. So I think, people are beginning to learn that maybe politics has to be played differently and do not be used as a fodder by politicians. However, there is a sense of sadness in the East, not only in the East, in other parts of the country. Someone also sent me a message saying the jubilation is not only in the Southwest, it's also in the North, where the president-elect got votes or received votes. But Abuja is quiet this morning, or yesterday morning, sorry. Absolutely. Again. Yeah. So I think that I've always said in the past few days, Nigeria is changing, and even if Labour did not win in this election, they have sowed a seed. They have sowed a seed that I believe will grow. And hopefully it will grow because it needs to grow. Power is not given, it's taken. And you have to be in the trench to get that power and to learn how to use that. Because you might get that power without being prepared. This is not saying that Labour Party is not prepared. They are going to court. Who knows, they might get their mandate. They may not. The thing though is that some people also think at least power came back to the South. Because the other issue was, how can you have 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, and after that you want power to go back to the North?
So it's an argument we mustn't run away from.
Right. What argument?
No, they're talking about the regional politics. Right. So it's something that is so germane that Nigerians perhaps, that was one of the reasons the APC was victorious at this election. Well,
Nigeria is complex. So it has to be a sort of agreement. You have to agree. When President-elect talked about unity, unity of what? What kind of unity that is not based on equality? Unity that is not based on hearing the other person out? Unity that is based on taking everything? No. People are not stones. They are human beings, and this is their country. So you really have to hear people out. Anyway, the power is back in the South, at least. Some people believe, it didn't go to the North, and that's a good thing. It's an issue that we need to, sort of discuss.
And speaking of unity, quickly here, Constance, we must also bring in perspective some of the northern governors and northern leaders who spoke on the side of the South, saying that, look, we are strong believers of this rotational, politics, and we believe it's the turn of the South. Notably, we saw some key governors who pushed for that in the APC.
Yes, they did. There are governors that said, you know what? Let's do this. Let's not begin something that we cannot finish, or that will lead, spark a political firestorm that we cannot quench. It's a delicate country, and it's delicate balancing, and it's very obvious. You have to do that. So that's why Bola Ahmed Tinubu, sort of won the ticket to become the president of the country. But even more fundamentally, like I said, is the election cycle going to save this country? Many people think no. We need deeper discussions about where we need to go. You don't need to be listening to foreigners who are giving you money to conduct elections every cycle and tell you what to do. What is good for your country? How are you going to build this country and make it a nation? That is very important, because look at the voting pattern in this election. Everybody fell back regional. most of the Easterners voted Obi, although he also got votes in South-South, and then got some votes in North Central. I think he won Plateau. He win Taraba? I think he won a couple of states in North Central. And then, you know, Southwest voted Bola Tinubu, except in Osun, that was taken by PDP. And then Lagos is very cosmopolitan, so it's a mix of Nigeria. So he lost in Lagos and narrowly. And then look at Atiku Abubakar, he fell back north, core north. You know, so this is a very regionalized country. So you have to recognize that, and we need to tell ourselves the truth. What will work for us politically? What is the system that will work for us? So we are not fighting every 4 years, so that we can bring a measure of stability and true unity, not the unity that we bandy about that doesn't mean anything to politicians, and they go back and sort of take actions that will blow up the place. We are the largest country on the continent. We need to do something about. We have to be punching at our weight. We can do better.
Well, in doing better, one other sore point has to do with inclusive politics. Politics of inclusion here. We'll look at regional politics, as well as even what we've also hear the president-elect talk about young population and the women population.
You see, thank you for bringing that up, women. I think I've touched on the youth briefly. Women. So when you look at the electoral politics in this country, women are non-existent. During President Obasanjo's time, he really tried to include women. There were quite a number of women ministers and DGs of parastatals. He did well. After that, he fell back to non-existence. And in this administration, it has been woeful. And I think they know it has been woeful. You cannot have half of your population not represented in your government or in governance, because they have something to offer. They have things to offer. And I think it goes back to the discussion on our political system, this so-called liberal Western democracy that we are practicing, which we are not practicing well. Let's look at our traditional African systems before colonialism. Certain regions in this country, so for instance, the region that I come from, there's what we call the male-female partnership. Women were not excluded. Yes, the women were not at the same level with the men. The men had their responsibilities and their powers. The women also had their responsibilities and powers. They were not in the backyard, in the other room, doing nothing.
I get the point.
They were very much involved. You need that. You need a balance. The man needs the woman needs the man. And if you do that, you will be surprised how this country will take off. But it's very difficult for women in this so-called liberal democracy. Why? Because it's very expensive. It's very expensive to be a politician in this country. Then secondly, when you get to the political space, the practices and the way they run this thing is not favorable to women. And then there's chauvinism. And yet when you roll back to before, women were not unseen, at least in my part of the country. I'm sure in the Southwest as well. In the Southeast, I come from Southeast. From the Southwest, I'm also sure that pre-colonial women were visible and had their roles. Apart from being mothers and aunties, politically, they were involved. So we need to look at this again. Should we be following blindly democracy, or should we roll back and look at our traditional systems? What can we borrow? Because Nigeria is peculiar. Africa is peculiar. There are so many things that we can incorporate in this modern system. Women are totally dispossessed, and for a lot of people, it's not acceptable.
I think you have a big point, and again, if you go back into history and you look at the regions, almost every region in the country has a place for women, categorically speaking, talking about a better place. And if you talk about the religious, bodies or faith-based organizations, you look at the Bible, you look at the Quran, women are well placed. So from where, that's the question. It doesn't look like a rhetorical question. From where did the men folk get this whole political sense of how well not to place the women properly? You could only see the women dancing at campaigns rallies, that's where they become more vocal.
Yeah.
But when the real deal is on the table, the women are absent. Now, so quickly here, we're trying to wrap up on this. Now, let's talk more quickly here on security, which we still haven't gotten a sense of the direction that this coming administration may take us to. He spoke on credit. He spoke on the economy. He spoke on the need for us to bring everyone together. He spoke on education. But the security, which is very, very big across the nation, doesn't seem so loud coming from the president-elect.
I mean, he just gave a brief speech today. I think in the coming days or months, we will hear more about how he intends to tackle security, because that is major.
Major.
If you do not have security, you can do nothing. You can literally do nothing, because people are terrified to move from one place to the other. They feel insecure. Businesses cannot run properly. I mean, let me go back to the change of the Naira, the redesign of the Naira. One of the reasons, sorry to bring that in, but one of the reasons that they gave was that so much money from kidnapping, ransom, trillions of Naira, and including from politicians, were in private hands outside bank vaults, So this kidnapping thing that became a business, people coming into the country because they hear they can make money from Nigeria, the terrorists, the bandits come here and running amok. The president-elect needs to do something about it. That's a very tough job for him. I don't know how he's going to figure that out, but he needs to get a team cracking. It's doable. It is doable. But like I always say also, you cannot tackle security just by putting the police on the streets, boots on the ground. You can also tackle it by creating prosperity. If people are affluent to an extent, nobody is going to go, kidnapping someone, running criminal gangs or things like that. You need to create an affluent society. That's not going to happen overnight. But you need consistent government and stability. For at least 30 years, Nigeria needs a 30 years unbroken progress, which is why, again, I come back to the meaningless political elections and exercise. What has it solved? So can we sit down and say, okay, please, guys, we need to wake up. We need to do something about this country. We need to. And be honest about it. Let it not be about, I just want to be president for the sake of being president. No, that's not good enough.
Well, I think at this point in time, I'd like to say it's a fine place for us to say many thanks for being such a nice company, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. I really hope we can do this again beyond the special talk of elections and policies that this government, incoming government, should be looking at. And again, if you missed out on any of these, you can actually go to our website, arise.tv. Still to come, we'll be playing you back some updates. We had some exclusives with some notable APC personalities during the presentation of Bola Tinubu's certificate of return. The Lagos State Governor there, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Akeredolu of Ondo State, and a potpourri of others who spoke to us exclusively. I'm Sulaiman Aledemene. Thanks for watching.